Going into the community and gathering information about people's faith and using it towards their healing processes.
Faith community nursing is involving the patient's faith in their care to better them as a whole, and involving the community together.
And I go faith community nurse, and what it is really integrating spirituality as being one of the primary functions of your assessment. I mean, it's something that you look at ahead of time, and very, very early on, before even doing physical assessment, you're looking at spiritual issues being a root of disease or being a root of some of the issues that we have. It's also the place where people find their strength. So I look at that specifically to know how to help them navigate through a disease process.
Okay.
Toils and snares I have already come. Disgrace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun.
Sure. Really just my own faith background, I find is a real source of strength there, and of hope and of healing there, and so that's part of what I want to give to patients, is a real sense of hope. A lot of people come totally discouraged, and they're just intimidated by a disease or an illness even, and I find that faith component really gives them a hope.
Praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise
I actually, after I did a undergraduate degree, so I did a post-degree certificate in parish nursing, which was the older term, through the University Incarnate Word, and so they did a specific class on what it looks like to put nursing inside of a church. And so we just did, it was really like an 18-month program that went there. It was a certificate. Now there's actually some certification starting to be developed, but it is a slow-moving process. Right now, that's not established, no, and so there are several annual seminars, and they're actually national seminars, so Christian Medical Dental Society and Journal of Christian Nursing, that have particular continuing education credits in those areas, and sometimes you'll find them in some of the major ones, the bigger conferences that they do have stuff, but right now there's not a requirement because the certificate process isn't completed yet. Okay. I mean, it has a really broad scope. It doesn't matter what religious background you come from. It's really where you as the patient find your strength. If you find it from Buddha, then it is from Buddha that we have to go from, and that's it. That part of nursing meets the patient where they are, and then they journey forward from that point.
toils and snares I have already come. Disgrace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace.
I don't think that they look any different than what you would see anywhere else. How they respond is very different. It's very different. There have been cases and times when we look at medication and we, such as in a migraine patient, and instead of her using migraine medicine after migraine medicine and going up and really adding these, when we've added the spiritual component to her, we've kept it down on minimal amounts of medications, and she's been able to go forward with that and figure out the things that were stressing her, that were triggering the migraines, and going on from there. So the patient's outcomes, I think, are much improved. And I think that their perception on their health improves significantly.
Praise God,
We've done community health screenings in churches or at health events. We did free school physicals and immunizations. We've done marketing campaigns where we put it out on the radio or done news and TV interviews. So most of it has been that and word of mouth.
Good job.
Praise God, praise God, praise
Use a lot, and it really depends on their particular needs. I do a spiritual assessment just within my own documentation. I don't really identify it to the patient and then do this. It is part of my whole assessment of the patient. So I look at those things, and as we start to talk about spiritual issues, those issues, then we can bring those things forward and say, is this a possibility and is this true in your life? Can we address this from this perspective? And so I use, spiritual assessment tools. There's some great information out there on spiritual roots of diseases that has some great research behind it. So, I look at that, and is this something that the patient is willing to go? But the patient really, really is the one that guides the progress into that or not. And then we stay where their faith decides they're going to stay.
my heart to fear and grace.
I offer them mine. If they don't want it, that's their choice, and then we just will follow. And this would be a great argument to say, well, then are you going to step outside of what medical guidelines are and what medical standards of practice are? And I'm going to say no. That will always be the standard there. That the safety standard must be there, and then we add to it with the faith side of it.
Through many dangers.
Yes, faith-based hospital system is really their foundation is in their mission and their values. They have certain statements, but because of the funding sources that they have to keep a very broad perspective, so that it is only really offered unless the patient brings it up. So thus, if they want to be visited by a chaplain, the patient has to request that, and then the chaplain comes from a very wide background, and they address the patient according to how they've decided to do that. So as a hospital system, it's a very, very broad thing. It doesn't necessarily end up in every assessment that you do. There is some spiritual, like there's this nursing diagnosis for spiritual distress. It is a part of nursing, and so as a nurse now, even in working in a hospital system, if you're a faith community nurse, then you certainly want to address it from that perspective first and be able to do that. And again, it's going to be the assessment of the patient that's going to determine whether you go into the spiritual assessment fairly quickly and use that as a big part of the plan of care, or whether they say, no, that's not something I choose to go with, then we just go on with our regular plan of care dealing with the physical, emotional, psychological needs.
Praise God, praise God,
I think faith community nursing is going to be far more direct. So they're going to go to the spiritual issues. They're going to initiate the spiritual assessment and the issues much more actively than just nursing as a whole. It is built into nursing. It is something they say that we should address, but the reality is when we're on the floor and it's busy, that's one of those low-level things that we anticipate is there, so we leave it down to the end, and it actually on our assessment forms ends up down at the bottom. So faith community nursing is going to bring that up to the top and say, is this something that you and I need to work on together, and can we work from this perspective? So I think that nursing as a whole has it within it, and we've got the diagnoses in there, and we've got the big picture of it, but when it's in a for-profit-based system, which in San Antonio, Baptist Health System is actually owned by Vanguard, which is a for-profit system, they have to be careful with that on the legalities of it. When you're in the community, you're less restricted by that because you generally aren't getting state funding or federal funding. For me, I don't think so. Other than I think that it's just difficult. It's difficult when you're trying to figure out where a patient's at and where we need to go, and really figure out how do we pull the two models together to fit something that works for them. So sometimes it's awkward, and if they come in pretty sick, you may not be able to address some of those higher level needs. You may need to start with the lower level and then go on and build your relationship with them first.
His grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, sing God's praise. Then what
I think it's trying to get somebody baby out of their tummy.
And that's what you think faith community nursing is?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I have a cookie now?